Hello, and welcome back to Word on the Street with Gary Clinton. It seems over the last few weeks we've been hearing an awful lot about the government shutdown, and we've heard a lot of different reasons from a lot of different people, coming from a lot of different angles. I think in order to shed a little bit of light on this, it's important for us to understand what exactly healthcare means. I think it has a lot of different meanings to different people. And a lot of the people who are saying that the government or the conservatives are taking the right to health care away from the citizens, it sparks a lot of outrage. And I think in order to understand why, I think we should probably try to understand a little more about exactly what the right to health care is. And looking at it from a Christian point of view, even just a deity point of view in general, most of us believe in God, and this explanation of mine primarily is for those who believe in God, those who believe in Christ. So what exactly is a right to health care? So what is health care? We all have a right to be healthy. We are children of God, and we are given a body in this earth, which we're given stewardship over a body, and it is our obligation, not only our right, but our obligation to take care of this body. And that can mean a lot of different things. It can be from not putting ourselves in imminent danger. It could mean feeding ourselves properly, getting the exercise we need, all the things that help us to care for our body. That is not only a right, it is an obligation. And I think for a lot of people, when they think about healthcare, they think about professions where they provide different healthcare for us. And so when we get into something like that, having the right to that healthcare, it muddies the water a little bit more. Because indeed, we have a right to healthcare. We have a right to live our lives in a healthy manner and take care of the bodies that we're given. And that includes nutrition, it includes exercise, and it includes to keeping ourselves safe in order that we can exercise the freedoms that are afforded us by God. Now, if for instance, we decide that we want to eat all kinds of unhealthy foods, and we don't necessarily want to exercise, we just want to enjoy our time eating what we want to, and we don't really care about the shape we're in, then we're doing ourselves a disfavor. We no longer have a right to be healthy due to our unhealthy practices. So when it comes to being healthy, it is our own personal responsibility, and in doing so, that is health care that we have a right to. So where does the water get really muddy? It's when we start talking about a right to taxpayer provided health care. And so what does taxpayer provided health care mean? It means that we have a government that looks out for us in certain ways. A government that collects taxes. And we have many people that believe that because the government collects taxes from us, that the government should indeed pay for our health care. And that simply is not the fact. The fact is we are personally responsible for our health care. And ideally, it comes from nutrition, exercise, doing the things that help us to be healthy. There are exemptions, there are conditions medically, psychologically, and otherwise things that are basically beyond our control. And there are to be other means to take care of those issues. What I'm speaking about now has to do with something that we are in control of, which is our own personal health care. We have the right to choose what we eat. We have the right to choose whether or not we exercise. We have the right to choose whether or not we do things that are dangerous, that could put us in imminent danger. So the question becomes, what is the government's role in our healthcare? I think the government's role in our healthcare should be some regulation of industry, since we're not growing most of our food anymore. We're not hunter-gatherers in the sense that that's where our primary substance is coming from. So there are industries that provide the bulk of this. And there are industries that gather the water and filter it and do the things with it to make it better for our consumption. And so the government does have a responsibility now to regulate some of those industries, to make sure that they aren't putting harmful substances in there that could cause us to have adverse effects on our health. Those are the kind of responsibilities that I believe our government should have when it comes to healthcare. Now, when it comes to government-funded healthcare, it's simply another way of saying taxpayer-funded healthcare. So who are the taxpayers? You and I are taxpayers. Our neighbors are taxpayers. So let's look at a couple of little scenarios here to kind of illustrate what exactly does that mean. Let's look at people in our neighborhood. We have neighbors, some who may be very well off, some who may be not so well off, some who are kind of right in the middle. They're doing okay. They don't have a bunch of extra, but they're not really struggling. They're doing pretty well. And we have those who struggle quite a bit. And then we have those who are either in a profession or in a position where they can certainly help, be that with healthcare, with medical services, or other services that might contribute to our healthcare. So if, for instance, there are no insurance plans at all, no kind of insurance for our healthcare, should we, say, fall and break a leg, something that we don't have the ability to heal ourselves, what do we do? Again, in this instance, there is no kind of insurance available for us to use. So what do? We go to our next door neighbor over here and say, hey, I've hurt myself and I can't really afford to go to the doctor. I really just don't have those extra funds right now. Is there anything you can do to help me out? Being a good neighbor who has means, they may or may not be willing to help us out. So you go to the next neighbor and they don't have the means. They're very poor. They're in need themselves. And if we knock on their door and ask them, there are some that would be willing to help. Some that would simply say, I'd love to help you, but I simply don't have the means to do that. And that's all right. We understand. We go to the next person who they're not doing bad. They're not really doing good. But we knock on their door and we ask them. And of course, it's their choice to say, yeah, I've got a little bit of extra. I can help you out. Let me see what I can do here. And we can go to the next neighbor, who's one who provides medical care, and say, hey, look, this has happened. I'm kind of in a bind here. I don't really have anything to pay for this. Is there anything you can do to help me out? And they have the choice to decide to help you out with that, or maybe not. That's simply their choice. Many people are good-hearted, and they will simply make the choice to help out because they know it is the morally right thing to do. And so we're in a position now where, even it could be through bartering. Maybe we'll do something for them because they're going to do something for us, but it's our choice to decide what we're going to do. It's their choice to decide if they're going to be able to help us out or not. So now let's look at another scenario. Again, there's no health insurance per se, and we injure ourselves again. Again, it's something where we have no ability to heal ourselves without some kind of professional intervention. So now we go to this neighbor's. We know he has plenty of extra, and the guy's really loaded. And we knock on his door, and say, hey, you know, I've been hurt. I don't have the money to take care of this, and you've got lots of extra. So it is your obligation to help me out, and you have no choice in the matter. You're going to help me out, like it or not. And we go to the next person who has nothing. They're hurting themselves, but we're going to knock on their door anyway. And when they come to the door, we're going to tell them, you better dig in and find what you've got because you're going to help me. You don't have a choice in the matter. You are going to help me. When we go to the next person, we know they're kind of, middle of the road, and do the same thing, knock on their door and tell them that, you're going to help me, like it or not. And then we go to the professional and tell them pretty much the same thing. I'm in need and I don't have the funds to pay for this. So you're going to provide the care for me, whether you want to or not. Now, in this scenario, people will probably be a little less likely to want to help because it's not something that they're going to be doing voluntarily. This is something we're telling them that they're going to be forced to do, like it or not. So why do I bring these two scenarios up? Because it's much like the life that we're living in. As godly people, we do have a moral obligation to help our neighbors. And for the most part, if we have extra, even if we don't have extra, a lot of times the good moral choice is to help somebody who's in need. And I think for a large part, a lot of people do that. They know it's their choice. They know it's their God-given right to make that choice, whether they're going to participate or not. And not being coerced into doing something, they're willing to help. And they want to be a good neighbor. And we find ways to work things out among each other, but we do it on a voluntary basis. And the second scenario is much like government-provided health care. Because we are taxed and we are told, like it or not, you're paying these taxes. So it's not volunteer. We're being coerced to pay these taxes. And then the government takes that money that they've collected from everybody else to serve the person who has less, doesn't have the means to take care of themselves. And it sounds moral. It sounds, like it's a good thing. People are going to get taken care of, and those who have a little extra are going to be the ones taken care of. But that's not how it really works out. It ends up working out that everybody is coerced to pay these taxes. So you're not volunteering your help. You're being told that we're going to take it from you and we're going to help your neighbor, like it or not. And not too many people really take kindly to that kind of thing. We don't like being coerced into things. And while on the outset it may look like it's a moral thing to do, but it is immoral. It's being coerced into doing something, not of your own volition. You're being coerced. And that is not part of God's plan. God expects us to help one another of our own choice, to make the morally right choice to help our neighbors. And when we get to a point where we're taking things from people in order to distribute it to other people, then it's no longer a voluntary thing. It's no longer community reaching out to help one another. It is people being forced to pay what they've worked hard for in order to give it to someone else. Now, it may feel like, it may sound like it's probably a morally right thing to do to help others, but when you're being forced to do it, it doesn't leave you feeling that way. It leaves you feeling like somebody has robbed you. And in many respects, that's what has happened. And it's not only the healthcare. There are a lot of other things where government has taken control of things, or at least got very involved in some things where you're taking from everybody to help those who are less fortunate. And it sounds good. It sounds morally good, but it's not being done by choice. And I think that's where so many people have a problem when it comes to the idea of being socialized, having socialized medicine and in a socialized society, because it's no longer a volunteer situation where you're helping your neighbor out of the kindness of your heart. You are being coerced to pay into a system that takes from those who have a little more and even those who have none in order to give it to others. And then the government becomes the one making the choice on who gets that help. It's no longer in your hands. It's no longer a voluntary thing. And so that's why we end up with so many who are so upset about government funded healthcare. Because in reality, it's taxpayer funded healthcare. And people are being taxed by coercion, not voluntarily, in order to take care of others. And it should be something that's coming from our heart, not something that's coming from things that we're forced into. And so, like I said, there are other programs that the government gets a hold of and takes from everybody in order to redistribute to those who have less. And it sounds like, you know, socialism could be a good thing in theory. It simply is not. And God expects us to do things out of the kindness of our hearts and to make that choice to do these things to help other people. It is not something that He would have forced upon us. And I think for a large part, when the government does get involved in a lot of these things, the decisions being made on who gets the help, what's going to qualify you for that help, there's a personal connection that is lost. We no longer have the ability to know a person and know, you know, understand what their needs are and to be able to help them out of the kindness of our heart. Because you've got a bunch of bureaucrats who are simply looking at numbers and they're going through and deciding, you know, oh, we're going to give them this, we're going to give them this, and, you know, we have to have so much. We're going to raise taxes on everybody else because we need to fund all these others. And you inherently end up with situations where somebody is taking advantage of these programs who's not truly in need. We have so many people on different programs that the government administers who are simply able to work. They're mentally able, they're physically able, they simply refuse to do so. They choose not to work because they know they're going to get this handout. They know they're going to get something that everybody else is providing for them. And when this gets out of control, which it is, as we look at it today, it gets out of control. And then those who are working hard to build a good life for themselves and for their families, they look at the fact that they are being taxed higher and higher and higher. And then they look at different people in the neighborhoods and in their communities who are completely able to work. They're bodily able to work and they don't do it. They're getting handouts. And that's pretty frustrating because in a situation where you would be willing to help, you know, because you have a little extra, but you see it being taken from you by force, essentially, and given to somebody who's not making anywhere near the same effort that you're making. And that causes you, of course, to be upset. And what happens eventually? Those who are providing for everybody else, those who are doing all the work, and then they're seeing somebody else get all the handouts, they get frustrated and they end up leaving, you know, the workforce. Because, you know, why work so hard to have something better for my family when it's all being taken away just to hand to somebody who's not making any effort themselves? And it becomes a revolving door. And we have so many people who end up leaving the workforce because they don't want to be working their tails off to provide for all those who refuse to do nothing. So again, when we look at the concept of government health care, it's really taxpayer provided health care. And the only way we're going to fix that system, this is not going to be very popular, but the simple fact of the matter is we need to do away with the Affordable Care Act. It was touted that it was going to be something affordable, that people who couldn't afford their insurance premiums were going to have a better market to go to, and that everything was going to be all right. Everything would be more affordable. But as it got into full effect, even before COVID, then there started being people who couldn't afford the premiums that they were being told would be more affordable. So we ended up with more government subsidies. And then when we had COVID come about and so many people were restricted to their homes, not being able to be in the workforce, forced out of their jobs in a lot of cases, then they, of course, were still no longer able to afford the premiums for the Affordable Care Act, which brought into effect a lot more subsidies, which comes from the government, which basically comes from the taxpayer. So again, those paying the taxes are collecting from all this money from those who are paying the taxes in order to subsidize not the individual, but the system of the Affordable Health Care Act, which is essentially government insurance. So now even more money is being taken from those who are working hard and being given to those who are not, in order to keep calling it affordable. It is a broken system. It needs to be done away with. So now the question becomes, what happens now with private insurance, where we know the premiums can be out of control? Again, because this is something that can get out of control, this is an area where the government should have some involvement, not by running the system, but providing some kind of regulation and some kind of common sense regulation where it's somewhat comparable throughout the nation. I mean, as it is right now with private insurance, when not being able to cross state lines to buy insurance in other places, it becomes less competitive. Therefore, a lot of insurance companies are able to charge high premiums, and they're able to limit some of their services. And this, of course, is one of the problems that led to the idea that we needed the Affordable Care Act, which, of course, creating the Affordable Care Act was not the answer. It was never going to be the answer. It's actually more expensive, and you have less services. So the change in healthcare needs to be in regulation of some of these private insurance companies. And part of that regulation is making it more competitive by allowing people to purchase their plans across state lines in order to go to other markets and purchase their insurance. If they can do that, and these insurance companies know that they can do that, then they're going to be more competitive in the sense that they're going to try to lower rates. They're going to work with the physicians to offer better service. They're going to work again with the pharmaceutical company, who, it's a whole nother story there, but it will allow them to work with the pharmaceutical companies in order to bring some prices down and to control some of the healthcare costs, in the sense that we're going to make sure we're going to put some guardrails up in order to help people be able to afford the insurance, not burden everybody more by taxing them and running an inefficient system. So if we really want to get control of healthcare, if we really want to exercise our right to healthcare, then it is our responsibility to let our senators, let our congressmen know what the common sense fix would be. And that would be getting the government's hands out of providing insurance for people in general and putting up guardrails in the insurance industry to help control some of the costs and to bring them more into affordability for the common person. And once that happens, that means that these insurance companies are now participating more in our capitalist environment and developing practices that will be competitive, that will help the common person be able to afford some of these policies. And when our medical industry and our pharmaceutical industry fall in step and they're able to price things in a way that will help us better afford the care that we need. And this, of course, does include encouraging everyone to control their nutrition, to eat healthier, to get their exercise, to take upon themselves the personal responsibility to be healthy. These are the kind of things that are going to help us to avert some of these things where we clash as individuals. Because when there are problems in government, when things get polarized on one side or the other, then that spills over into the communities and we start becoming enemies with our neighbors because we have neighbors who are in greater need. We have greater neighbors who are in less need. And when some people see themselves being taxed more to help those who have less, and they're not being able to do that on a voluntary basis, it is offensive and it does cause problems. And that's why it is so imperative that we as individuals take personal responsibility for our health. And in that sense, we truly do have a right to health care. And it is ungodly to believe that we have a right to taxpayer-funded health care. Because in most instances, again, I say there are exceptions, but in most cases, our health and our health care are our own personal responsibility. Look to the scriptures and look to God for the answers you need to feel good about these things in your heart. It is our responsibility to seek out the answers, not to seek out others to solve our problems for us. And I would hope that we all take the opportunity to do so. It's my wish that we would all look at things with common sense and with understanding and with a willingness to help those around us, but of our own choice, not being coerced into doing it by a government. So if this has helped you out any at all, if you like what you've heard, please hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't done so, and share this. I hope that it helps somebody understand a little bit about what we're really facing when we hear all this noise about health care and about our rights to health care and how our rights are being infringed upon, by those who want some common sense legislation in place. So look it over, use some common sense, talk to your politicians who represent you, and let them know what kind of common sense things need to be done in order for us to get a grip on what's going on in our society. Once again, hit the like button if you like what you heard. Put your comments in there. The comments you make will help me to create more content, the kind of content that you would like to hear. I will keep my ears open and try to gather as much information as I can in order to provide content that you might want to hear. So until next time, God bless. Word out.